5, Kufay. I don't know what number it is, but let's start over from Tana Rabbanan, which is a little less than halfway down. The rabbis taught. Parim upara v'sara mishtaleach hamishaleach hasafa v'hamaitzan metame begadim v'hinatzim ein metame begadim. The cows that are burnt outside the temple, the red heifer that's burnt outside the temple, the goat that's sent outside the temple off the cliff. So the people that are involved in the burning or the taking them out, their clothing become tamei. But these things themselves, but if clothing touch these animals themselves, the clothing isn't tamei. However, if food touches these animals, then that food does become tamei. Divrei Reb Meir, that's the words of Reb Meir. The Chachamim agree to most of it. Para uparim mitam neichlin umashkin, that the cow and the cows, they will contaminate food and drink, but sara mishtaleach ein metame. But the goat that's pushed off will not contaminate. Shehu chai, because it's alive. It won't contaminate food. Definitely doesn't contaminate clothing according to everyone. But the Chacham say it won't even contaminate food. If it's living, before it's pushed off, it won't contaminate food and drink. Bishlam Reb Meir, the Gemara says it makes sense according to Reb Meir, Kidatana de Rabbi Shmuel, as was taught in the house of Rabbi Shmuel. The Tana Be Rabbi Shmuel was taught in the house of Rabbi Shmuel. Al kol zera zerua, on all grain, anything that's planted, mazraim, just like grain. Shein seif the tamid tamachamura. Grain cannot contaminate a person. We call it here strict tuma and a lenient tuma. Strict tuma contaminate a person, can contaminate a person, and the lenient tuma only contaminates food and drink. So just like grain cannot do the strict contamination. And it needs to be prepared for it itself to become tamei. How does it get prepared? It gets wet. Once it's wet, then it can contract tuma. Afkol shein seifel tamei chamura. So to anything else that cannot make people tamei, which doesn't have the strict tuma. Tzrichin hechsher is going to require preparation. Okay. Yatzasa nevela seiftar sheseifel tamei chamura. This is excluding a kosher bird that died, that it will contaminate a person. I mean, it does have a strict contamination. But it does not need to be prepared. It doesn't need to get wet to contract tumah, which is interesting because it's tummy already. Well, is it tummy? It will make the person tummy that swallows it, but will it become? It's a food. Is it able to receive another tumah? So we're saying that it doesn't need to be prepared. It doesn't need to be wet to receive other tumah. Because if you touch it, you don't become tamei. If you touch the bird, you don't become tamei. What about, will the food become tamei if it touches a sheretz or something, and then it touches other food? Will that food become tamei? So the answer is yes. The question is, does it need to get wet first before? So we're saying that it doesn't need to get wet first. Okay. Now what we're seeing from that is that since an animal that could make a person tamei, for example, the animal that's sent off the cliff, the person that brings it there becomes tamei. That means that it's a tumah chamura. It's a strict tumah. It makes a person tamei. So will the animal contaminate food while it's alive? So because Rabbi Shmuel holds that anything that can do a strict tumah does not need to get wet, so here also, because it can give a strict tumah, it doesn't need to be dead. It doesn't need to be prepared to contaminate. Ela l'Rabbanan, however, according to the rabbis that hold that it does need to be prepared, and since it's alive, it won't contaminate food. If they hold of the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael, then afilu samar shtaleach, then the goat that's pushed off the cliff should contaminate food. Ilesle, if they do not hold of Rabbi Yishmael's opinion, afilu paro param minalan. So where do they know that the cow that's burnt should contaminate food, and the cows that are burnt outside the temple, and the red heifer? Where do they know that should contaminate food?
Where are we, Rabbi? I'm sorry. Kufches Amud.
Aman Kufhei, 105a, and we did this yesterday. I'm going over the last piece from yesterday. So, Ki Yasser Rabdimi Amar, when Rabdimi came, he says, Amri b'Marava, they said in Eretz Yisrael, Tzrichem hechsher tumma mimakam acher. That even according to Rabbi Yishmael, it still needs to be able to contract tumah from outside, and since anything that's alive cannot become tamei, a living animal cannot become tamei. It's walking around alive, even if it touches something, a sheretz or whatever. It's a living; it doesn't become tamei. So therefore, this living animal won't be able to give tumah over to food or drink. And that would be the opinion of the rabbis. Boy Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar has a question. Parim usir manisrafim. The animals that are sacrificed outside the temple, that are sacrificed in the temple, but they're burnt outside the temple. The blood is sprinkled in the sanctuary. Ma'oshi yitamo eichlam umashkim bifnim.
Rabbi, I'm sorry. Can I just chronologically? They would shecht it inside.
They would
and
sprinkle
then they would do the blood inside, and then they would
not
take
only
it,
the blood inside, the blood in the sanctuary.
but they would sprinkle it, and then they would come outside of the base of Mikdash.
Then they would walk outside the sanctuary into the courtyard. They would take the animals. They would separate the inner organs, which they would put on the altar. They would take the animals and they would burn them outside 3 camps. They would walk them out of the temple, out of the Harabayas, and they would burn them out there.
Did you say it was like a Levia or something? One of the camps was Levia?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they would walk them out of all 3. So the question here is when does it become tamei? When does the person become tamei? Good morning. When does the person that become tamei when does the person that's taking them out become tamei? So we said there were 2 opinions. You need glasses?
Yeah.
There may be glasses, and was there a?
I have in the car.
When does the person become tamei that's taking them out?
Yesterday, huh?
So when he leaves the courtyard, according to the sages. So that's when the person becomes tamei. When does the animal contaminate food? Because we just said, it was according to Reb Meir and according to the Chachamim, these animals will contaminate food if they touch food. So do we say that mechusa yitziak mechusa maisadami oilai? Do we say that because it wasn't brought outside yet, the temple, so because it doesn't contaminate the person yet, so therefore it won't contaminate food? Or do we say that because it's going to contaminate the person as soon as he walks outside, therefore it already contaminates food? So Hadar Pashte, Rabbi Lazar then answered his own question, mechusa yitziak mechusa maisadami. Until you take it out, you're lacking in the preparation for this, and it's still not contaminating people, so therefore it won't contaminate food yet. Once you take it out, it contaminates not while it's inside. That's considered enough of an action that if you didn't do it yet, it's not going to contaminate food. Rababa bar Shmuel Reb Meir B'chia Barabba. Rababa bar Shmuel asked B'chia Barabba. Nevela seiftar l'Reb Meir. Maushi yitame b'kazayas. A bird that's kosher, that wasn't shechted, it died. So it contaminates a person when he swallows it. So we learned that if it contaminates a person, it should also contaminate food and drink.
Once he swallows it, it becomes contaminated?
When he swallows it, he becomes contaminated and his clothing becomes contaminated.
He becomes tummy, right?
Right. But we said that anything that can contaminate a person will also contaminate food and drink, a tumakala.
Mm-hmm.
So, when does it contaminate the person? When he swallows it. So, when it's placed on the ground, that we have no question that it's not going to contaminate food and drink because it wasn't put in his throat yet. It can only contaminate the person when he swallows it, at that moment. When it's in his mouth, we have no problem that it's going to contaminate food and drink if there was other food and drink in his mouth because it's right there ready to be swallowed. So it's not considered like it's missing an action, but missing an action, not in action. Missing an action. When is the question? When it's in his hand. The movement of the hand up to his mouth. Is that considered like it's missing the action and therefore it's not going to contaminate food yet? Or maybe not, or maybe that's not considered a significant action that, it's missing in the preparation for it to become, to contaminate a person, so right now it's not going to be able to contaminate food. Maybe it's missing too much. So, he responded back, that moving the hand, this bird from hand to the mouth is not considered that a significant action, and therefore it will already contaminate food while it's in his hand. In other words, it only makes him tamei when he swallows it, but it will already make food tamei when he's holding it in his hand. Eisvei. Gemara has a question. 13 things were said regarding a nevela seiftar, a bird that's kosher. We're on 105b. 13 things were said about this bird that wasn't shechted, and it's dead. And it makes a person tummy when he swallows it. And the following is one of them. Tzricha machshava. You see, food that's tamei will make something else tamei. Will make other food tamei.
Food can't make an animal tamei.
Food can't make an animal. Right. Here we have this bird that is not necessarily edible because it died, it wasn't shechted. Is someone going to eat this or not? Is this considered food? So if a person thinks, yes, I'm going to eat it, so that makes it into food. And now it can contaminate other food. Now it needs to be a certain size to contaminate food. It needs to be the size of an egg. It needs to be it needs to be a kazayas to contaminate him when he swallows it. It needs to be the size of an egg to contaminate other food. We're going to get into that in a moment. But one of the things that it says over here is that it needs to, if it's going to contaminate food, it needs to be thought of by the owner that he's going to eat it.
So if he only has a kazayas and not a kibetza, it can't be matama something else.
It's going to be matama him. Wait a moment on that. But it doesn't need to be wet. That we said. Why? Because, like Rabbi Shmuel says, it's matama to masaychlin. It's matama to machamura. It makes him tamei. It doesn't need to get wet to contaminate other food. Or to be contaminated by other things. And it will make other food contaminated if it's the size of an egg. My love, is this not Reb Meir? It must be Reb Meir. Why? Because Reb Meir says that it doesn't need to get wet, because Reb Meir before held like Rabbi Yishmael, that anything that will contaminate a person doesn't need to get wet. So what is our problem here? If it's Reb Meir, the problem here is, how big does it need to be in order to contaminate food? It needs to be the size of an egg. Now, where is the food? We're assuming that the food is in his hand.
Why?
Because when does it not need to be contaminate? When does it not need to be wet? Only when it will contaminate a person. That's why it doesn't need to get wet. So, if it's in his mouth, then you can't say that he needs to think about it in order to turn it into food, because he already put it in his mouth. So it's already food because he put it in his mouth. You can't say it needs thought. So it can't be in his mouth. It can't be on the ground, because if it's in the ground, then it would need to be wet. So it must be that it's in his hand. If it's in its hand, so then why does it need to be the size of an egg? It should be already at the status of a tumah chamura, which would contaminate him, which is only a kazayas. So this is, somehow it's a proof that the fact that it's in his hand is still lacking an action.
Because it's not a kibetza.
Because it needs to be a kabeya. It needs to be the size of an egg.
Yeah.
If it was not lacking an action, then it would only need to be the action of bringing it up to his mouth to eat it.
Mm-hmm.
Then it would need to be only the size of an olive, because the size of an olive contaminates him. Anything that can contaminate him will contaminate food. But we're saying that even though the size of an olive contaminates him, the size of an olive will not contaminate food. Why not? Because it's not going to contaminate him until he puts it in his mouth. That means that the action of lifting it from his hand to his
once
mouth,
he does put it in his mouth,
then it will contaminate food at the size of in his mouth. Let's say the size of an olive. So we're saying that he responded that is there is the action of bringing it from your hand to the mouth, is that considered a significant action? He said that it's not considered a significant action. Here we're saying that it is, because it needs to be the size of an egg. Where it says loy, it's the Rabbanan it's really the Rabbanan, and therefore it doesn't contaminate food unless it's the right size. It's not. It needs to be the size to pick up tuma from outside. That's what the Rabbanan held. So, Haktani Reisha tzricha machshava vein tzricha hechsher. How can you say it's the Rabbanan? You said it doesn't need to get wet. The Rabbanan would hold that it doesn't need to get wet. Man shamet lehai svara Reb Meir. Who holds that it doesn't need to get wet? Reb Meir holds that. Umi de Reisha Reb Meir. And since it says that it doesn't need to get wet, it must be Reb Meir. So Seifanami Reb Meir. So the end of it that says that it needs to be the size of an olive, that needs to be the size of an egg, it must also be Reb Meir. And then it must be that the significant thing here is that the person didn't put it in his mouth yet. And that's what we're talking about. Is it considered a lacking an action to take it from the hand to the mouth? Or do we consider that it's done already? It's not significant enough. It's already should contaminate at the higher level. So Seif is also Reb Meir. So the Gemara says, Midi area. Do you have to grab it like that? Do you have to take it? Hakadisa v'hakadisa. You divide it up. The beginning is Reb Meir. The end of it is an opinion of. We're just listing things that are said regarding a nevelas iftar, this type of bird, this kosher bird that died. We're just saying different points. This point came from Reb Meir. That point came from the Chachamim. The problem is v'amidik tani seifa, but since it says in the end, shchita malikasa mitaheres treifasim mitamasa. You see, we said that this bird died, but let's say it was slaughtered, and then afterwards they checked the inside of it, and they found out that it was treif. So the shchita was really nothing. So is this considered a bird that died, or is this considered a bird that was shechted? But let's say they did malika on it. They put the fingernail through it as a sacrifice.
Well,
This is a kosher bird.
But I understand. You said shechting, but don't they always do malika? Is there a shechting for a bird?
No, if it's shechted because it's not a karban, or if it was malika because it was a karban.
Okay.
So Reb Meir is of the opinion that both shchita and malika purify it from becoming a nevela seiftar, even though it was treif, even though inside they checked the stomach or whatever and they found that there was a hole in it and it was treif. So, nevertheless, it's still not considered a nevela, a type of bird that would contaminate. Why? Because the shchita was done on it. So that's Reb Meir's opinion. Man shamet lahai svara. Who holds that opinion? Reb Meir. So Reisha v'Sefer Reb Meir mitzvah rabbanon. You have the beginning and the end Reb Meir, and the middle is the rabbi's opinion that say that it needs to be the size of an egg. In Reisha v'Sefer Reb Meir mitzvah rabbanon. It's not a problem. It's a list, and in the list we said different things. So we have the beginning is Reb Meir, who says that it doesn't need to get wet. The middle is that it needs to be the size of an egg, is the rabbis. In the end, it says that if it was shechted or malika was done, that's the opinion of Reb Meir.
Is it normal to repeat itself like this? Why couldn't you just say Sefer Rabbi Meir and say Rabbi Meir in?
Yeah, that's how it doesn't. In Reisha v'Sefer Meir mitzvah rabbanon. You know, different mesechtas are edited differently. Some mesechtas, you read them, you feel like this is not the same as the last mesechta. So this, over here, this is normal, yeah.
Style-wise, okay.
Amalei Rav Hamnuna le Rab Zeira. Rav Hamnuna says to Rab Zeira, Lei teisiv karach. Do not sit down. Karach means a bed, I think. It means your feet. Don't sit down on your feet. Why would he sit on his feet? I guess it means just keep standing.
Yes, the note.
Ad amritli hamilsa, until you tell me the following. This is like busy people. They don't like board meetings, so they have all their board meetings with money without any chairs. They go fast. So he says, tell me the answer to this question. Nevela seiftar Reb Meir. According to Reb Meir, that says that a nevela seiftar will contaminate food, even though it only contaminates the person when he swallows it, but it will contaminate food. We said when it's in his hand. So, mainin la rishon v'sheni, ayin mainin rishon v'sheni. Does it have the levels of this is a rishon, the nevela, and it touches food which is that touches the food, the nevela itself is an avatama. The food is going to be a rishon. The food can touch other food which is a sheni. Will it work in such a fashion? Or does it not work in such a fashion? And only the one that touches it becomes tamei, but it won't contaminate anything else. Amarlei. So Rav Hamnuna, Rab Zeira responds, Kol heichad demetame adam b'maga mainin larishin v'sheni. Kol heichad ein metame adam maga in main by rishin v'sheni. Only if it will contaminate a person by touching him will we count first level tuma, second level tuma. But since here it doesn't contaminate a person by touching him, it only contaminates a person when he swallows it. That's that bird, the kosher bird that died. So it will contaminate food, but only one step. It won't continue on that this food can contaminate another food. Rab Zeira me Rab Abba Rab Ami bar Chia, Ramila me Rab Oven bar Kahana. My other Gemara adjusted this. It was Rab Oven bar Chia, Rab Oven bar Kahana. Okay. Rab Zeira asked from someone, Hadatanan, this that it says in the Mishnah. Chiburi oichlin al yedei mashkin. Chibur to makala, ve'in chibur to machamura. Ma'inu barishin risheni, ein ma'inu barishin risheni. In order for food to make something tamei, it needs to be the right size. Let's say you have two pieces of nevela, and each one is not the size of an olive. However, there's liquid in between them that's attaching them. So this is considered attached, that if someone touches them, then this is the nevela itself.
It equals two of these that are less than a kazayas
will equal kazayas.
Okay.
I want to point out that we said before that it needs to be the size of an egg to become tamei. That's dealing with something that's regular food that's not tamei. It's contracting tumah from something else. How will that food? It will become a rishon. Here I'm not dealing with food. Here I'm dealing with the nevela itself. The nevela itself is only, if it's a kazayas, it will make tummy. It doesn't need to be the size of an egg. The size of an olive will make tummy. The problem here is it's not a size of an olive. It's half an olive. The problem is that there's two halves of an olive, and there's liquid between them, the gravy between them that's combining them. So this is the type of connection that will make food tamei, but it won't make a person tamei. Now, because it won't make a person tamei, it's because it's not really connected. It's not really a full olive to make a person tamei, but it will contaminate food. So will we say that when it makes food tamei, that food is the first one, and then it touches other food and make it a second? Or will we view it the way we just said before, that it will only make it this food tamei and it won't continue on? So he responded back, Amalei, Kol hechad metami adam ma'inu barishin risheni, ein metami adam ein ma'inu barishin risheni, exactly the way we said before, that if it can't contaminate a person, then we only say that it will contaminate the first food that touches it, but that food that touched it cannot contaminate a second food. Okay. The problem with us learning this is that it's so like in a vacuum. We don't have all of we don't. When you're learning the laws of impurity, so it's this whole big subject, and it starts, what types of materials and what types of impurities and what types, and you can do that. The problem is here, it's just quoting things that it's not really our subject. We're quoting examples of different things, and it's not our subject. So, but these things are very significant when you take them back to Taharas. The Daf Yomi doesn't have Taharas, doesn't have that whole section, because it only has Mishnayos. There was no Gemara on that. Why is there no Gemara on it? Maybe because the Gemara was made in Babylonia when it wasn't relevant. It was after the temple, so they didn't study it. So why did they study the sacrifices? I don't know. There was no temple. Maybe it was...
Saying this is after when did they start writing the Gemara?
The Gemara started after the death of Rebbe, which was about year 200.
Between the first and the second?
No,
after the second, that's when they started writing the Gemara. But they were Meshachist and they were hoping
the problem is, that's true, I believe that they were.
Right.
But they, then why didn't they study the laws of purity? Why didn't they study the laws of, that's also relevant.
Tumah.
The Tumah, we don't have the Gemara on it. Okay. Yatsu Elu Ve'elu. When they left the temple, the sacrifices that need to be burnt outside, then they became tummy. Both became tummy. The Mishnah said really that the first ones that went out became tummy when they went out, because they're carrying it like in a line. So they're carrying the animal out. When you leave the temple, the ones carrying it in the front became tummy, but the ones inside didn't become tummy. When they both left, then they both became tummy. Then they were all tummy. Minani Mili, how do you know that when you leave the temple you become tummy? The Tana Rabbanan was taught in a Brais. Over there it says outside the three camps. Where's over there? By the Par Kayin Mashiach and the Par Halam Davar. That means if the Kayin Gadol did an Avera, and if the entire congregation did an Avera based on a psak of the Sanhedrin, that was a mistake. So they had to bring the special sacrifice that was blood sprinkled in the sanctuary, and the flesh was burnt outside. So over there it says it was taken out from all the camps. Bekan l'machana achas. Over here it only says when it's dealing with Yom Kippur, the bull of Yom Kippur, which is also burnt outside, but it says it's taken outside. Yoitzi al michutz l'machana, it's taken outside the camp. Loi malach. Why does it say? We know that it's burnt outside all three camps. Why does it say taken out one camp? It's coming to teach you. It's coming to teach you. Why does it mention one camp? It has to be taken out of all three camps. It says no. It's significant because that first camp, when it exits the temple, it makes him tamei. It makes his clothing tamei, the person that's doing it,
and not him.
Well, him. And when it says clothing, it means him and his clothing. I believe so. Okay. V'hi gufa minalan. And how do you know that? Actually, the Shita Mekbet has a different verse here. It really has a Omar Mar. We learned before that over there it says it's taken out of three camps. How do we know that it's really three camps? The Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, that the cow is taken out of the camp. And chutz l'gimel machanes. That means it's out of the three camps. This is the Kayin HaMashiach, the one when the Kayin Gadol doesn't have Avera.
Just out of curiosity, but how far is that? That
means out of off the temple grounds, off the temple mount grounds, off the Harabayas. Mm-hmm. The temple is the first camp. The Harabayas is the second camp. In Yerushalayim is the third. I think that's how it works.
So it's outside of Yerushalayim. Chutz. Oh, yeah, no. So it could
outside,
be Yerushalayim.
It means outside Yerushalayim. It means outside Yerushalayim. Machane Shchina, Machane Levia. Yeah, I believe it means outside Yerushalayim.
How did they transport these things?
They carried it on the sticks.
That's what they did.
No Uber.
What?
No Uber.
No Uber, yeah.
Okay. You say it's out of the three camps.